Good evening, I'm Shumaisa Rehman and you're watching The Minister, an exclusive series on PTV World where we bring you interviews with the federal ministers of Pakistan. Today we are joined by Minister Zubaida Jalal. Her ministry is a Ministry of Defense Production, and it's an industry that I'm sure a lot of you would like to know about. Aside from that, I have to add, before I start the show, that it is International Women's Day. So on behalf of myself and my entire team on PTV World, we'd like to wish you a happy Women's Day. Assalamu alaikum, Minister Saiba.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you very much for having taken out the time. We're very grateful. And I'd like to start off with what I said in the beginning when I introduced you to my audience, the ministry that you're heading. Firstly, I have to say, kudos to you. I mean, when people think about defense, when they think about the military, it's generally an area in our minds, at least so far, that is psychologically dominated by men. So it's wonderful to see a woman heading this ministry. So firstly, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And secondly, there are a lot of questions that come up when you talk about the Ministry of Defense Production. And I'm sure you've heard that as well.
Exactly.
What exactly is it composed of? What sort of production? What does it entail? Is it industrial? Do you collaborate with other countries? If you could just shed some light on that.
Basically, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and thanks once again. As you said, I'm actually the first woman to head the defense production in the history since the Defense Production Ministry came into being in Pakistan. And I think it's an honor. It just proves that women are no lesser than anyone. It's just the opportunities that we, whenever they're available, women prove their mettle. Even myself, when I was, assigned this portfolio by the Prime Minister, coming with a background from education and someone who's been an educationist, who's had a journey of, say, like nearly 40 years, teaching and then going into becoming the Federal Minister for Education.
You have previously held that post,
the
Minister of Education.
Exactly. So that was a little bit of a startling, news for me.
Were you expecting this at all?
I wasn't expecting. I was expecting something, some portfolio where I could do something for the other provinces also.
Okay.
Since education is now a devolved, people were expecting that I'll come back into education because of my last performance. And, but because it's devolved and after the 18th Amendment, I would have been confined to Islamabad only. Right. So that's the reason that I think this change of ministry, in the sense that I'd be able to do for other provinces and specifically for Balochistan. So I wasn't expecting the defense. I thought maybe, communications or postal or something.
Were your male colleagues surprised as well?
Everyone. Everyone was surprised that how come. But let
so
me
how
tell
come,
you.
I'd like to know, how come the Prime Minister decided that you would get this particular ministry? He must have seen certain qualities specific in you because, like you said, your background is education.
Right.
But there has to be more than that for him to give you this ministry.
Exactly. I think what, as I said, is basically to be, keeping my past experience in working with the government and how I sort of built an integrated, acceptable or ownership by other provinces in the education field, maybe seeing that experience. Defense production is also one of the most vital ministries, I would say.
I can imagine.
Yeah, because normally, as you said earlier in your introductory remarks, is that when people think of defense, people think it's just weaponry, and there's nothing much to it, and defense ministry is separate to defense production. So even my own understanding wasn't as much as I've learned in the past 6 months. There's so much that is much more than just producing weapons. We have like about 5 main establishments, as we call them, like the Pakistan Ordnance Factory. There's the heavy industrial in Taxila. We have the NRTC, which is, in Haripur, the National Radio Telecommunication. There's a Kamra, you have the Pakistan Aeronautical Complex, where we are now, hearing about the JF-17 Thunders.
Yes, those are all over.
The achievement that we have had.
True.
Then there's the shipyard in Karachi. So there's so much happening there, and within that, the policy that we have decided, which is the policy of the government and the Prime Minister's own, initiative, where we are looking into how to strengthen these establishments. They're already doing a lot of good work in the sense in strengthening the economy through foreign exchange, because there's a lot of country to country agreements that are going on. But now we would want to go more into joint ventures. We would like to go more into strengthening our own industry and vendors, because there's
so you're looking at exports
mostly, and rather self-reliance, exports, and lesser on imports. That is what the new reforms that we'll be putting into place.
Okay, so now that I think I've gotten a better understanding of the kind, tell me this, currently, what percentage of our defense production do we actually export, and what would our targets be, because you're looking at bringing in foreign exchange?
Yeah, I would say that at the moment, it depends on the kind of production that is happening. There's anything from a bullet to, as I said, the JF-17 Thunder, and to the drones and all other aspects of it. So it depends on the kind of orders that we get. It also depends, but let me tell you that nearly about, from what I've seen in my first briefing like 6 months back, it was the kind of exports are much more, imports are much more in raw material or in specific requirements of, as we say, purza parts and spare parts and stuff like that. So now changing that, we would be looking toward a target of at least 60% export and lesser import. But as we grow, in the next 5 years, I would want to and wish to see where it would be the most, maybe 20% of imports and 80% the other way around for exports.
Okay, wow, that's impressive. And when you're talking about expanding any industry, it's very interesting for the audience to hear this, because then we're also talking about job creation. The more an industry goes, the more jobs there are. And that is something that we do desperately need in Pakistan, given the current economic environment. So how do you see that?
For instance, 3 different forces and 3 different requirements. Now for when I'm repeating myself in this when I'm saying it, that when India and the partition happened, we had 3 shipyards. The Indians had 2 or 3 of theirs, and then after 1965, naturally the war where East Pakistan and West Pakistan separated, Bangladesh had 2 shipyards. Today Bangladesh has about 26 shipyards, and India has about 43 shipyards, and Pakistan just has 1.
Wow.
So that is where we are 70 years later. So we initiated, and hopefully inshallah soon we'll have a new shipyard. And when I say shipyard, we talk about construction of ships in Gwadar, maintenance and repairs, and then services of oil tankers. Now the day the government of Balochistan clears the NOC for the land that we are asking for, it's the first time that we are not going to buy land. We are going to work it out within our own people, with the people of Balochistan and the government of Balochistan on an equity basis. So where you see the ownership then comes not only by the federation or the forces, but the provinces.
But then you're also actually changing the model that has prevailed in Balochistan so far, and it does affect the psychology of a people, where you're actually going in and doing a partnership so that they feel that they have a stake in it. Now, will that also translate into job creation? When you say we're going to do this, then that means we will employ and train the local population. We're not going to import the labor from various parts of Pakistan, because this is So that will also be
You see
part of it.
the building that harmony between all other provinces also. But Balochistan, as we've seen, internally and otherwise, the kind of grievances that people have had. CPEC is one, sort of issue which is really in front of us. If you look at Rekodik, you have Rekodik also as an example of the kind of agreement that the federations did. So this is going to change that whole overall culture, and we'll be an example, setting an example where equity, we say the day it is operationalized, whatever profit, Balochistan will get a percentage of that. And then this agreement will be with the province itself, so we are not going to say this kind of a percentage, but an agreement between both. In the same way, on the job opportunities, the day we set foot on that land, 5,000 jobs are going to be created.
Yes, I heard you announce that a few days ago.
And then it will be like, optimal when it goes to its utilization, it will be like 25,000 jobs available. Now, what we are also saying here to build that harmony and that trust and confidence between the defense, the people of Balochistan, and the federation itself. We're saying maybe jobs up to grade 16 would be 100% for the youth of Balochistan. Okay. We'll be training them simultaneously so that they have the capacity in whether it's skilled labor or administrative jobs. But then after 16 and above, we'd say yes, on merit, an opportunity for all Pakistanis, and then the 6% quota should be implemented at the higher level. So that's the kind of initiatives. In the same way, what we have done is with the Air Force, and soon the Air Force will be setting up it's called the MRO, which is the maintenance, repair, and operation, overhaul, maintenance, repair, and overhaul of our own airplanes, the Air Force, requirements, and this would be set up at the International Islamabad Airport.
Okay.
So this again is an opportunity for creating several thousand jobs, and it won't be confined. As I said, even the shipyard wouldn't be for the needs of the Navy, but it will be on the commercial side also.
Okay.
In the same way, MRO is also going to be on the commercial side. So this is going to create a huge number of jobs also. Then we recently, maybe day before yesterday, you may have heard, I introduced the bill for the commercialization of the HIT in the assembly. And this is now going to be debated and discussed at the several sort of platforms that we have before it comes for the passing of an act. Now that again is going to upgrade the HIT that we have, and then the surplus kind of whether it's raw material, whether it's the electricity they are generating or other, so that will then be commercialized so that other institutions can even buy from HIT. This wasn't the case before.
Okay, so you're looking at a commercial angle to each of the projects that you are actually taking on.
Which means job opportunities, which means financial viability, self-reliance, helping the economy to grow. And maybe there may come a day where we would not need the GDP to give us our defense budget, and we'll be
possibly
able to,
I think that would be quite
if this is how we move forward, inshallah, that day will also be close by.
Okay, and what are the timelines that you're looking at for each of these projects? I'm sure in the last 6 months you've conceived them, you've discussed them, you've proposed them, and now moving forward, you could say perhaps in a year or 2 years or 3 years, because during your 5-year tenure, I'm sure you'd like to actually take things to completion.
Yeah, I would say, it's taken us 6 months at least. There's a lot of documentation that needs to be done. There's a lot of, approvals that we require from the law itself. And also, first and initial was the go-ahead and green signal from the Prime Minister himself when we put up our... And he was very clear. He's very much in for the public-private partnerships, for strengthening our own, smaller industries in the private sector, especially the vendors, where we, have our sort of collaborations with on spare parts, as I said. So he's very much for that. The finance ministry also approved. We'll be sitting with the industry ministry soon on how to actually, come up with concrete results.
But I can't imagine anybody resisting these ideas, because if you're saying the ultimate goal perhaps is not just the job creation or the social corporate welfare, but the ultimate goal is to have the defense budget of Pakistan, the defense ministry being able to sustain itself. I think everybody would be quite happy, because it would free up a lot of resources to your primary passion, education.
Itself.
Which is needed.
We have not. I've been just, like normally we do, sitting in the assembly, discussing these issues, lobbying in a way for these bills to pass. I've not found any resistance, whether it's the Senate Standing Committee on Defense Production, which is chaired by General Qayyum, who is again a PMLN person, and even in the same way with the National Assembly Standing Committee, which has just been set up, but there are many opposition members there. So whoever I've been speaking to and talking and, sort of giving out these feelers just to see how their response is, everybody's for it, as I said, and you're saying everybody's for it, because it's for the benefit of the people of Pakistan itself. So
okay, well, coming back to an issue which I'm sure is close to many people's heart, including mine, because it is International Women's Day. Like you just mentioned, and I mentioned as well, you're a woman sitting in the driving seat. Generally, it's supposed to be a man. And it couldn't have been easy. You said 40 years. 40 years don't happen overnight. It's not just years, it's every day that matters. You come from a province which is considered, a province which has been neglected, which doesn't have those kind of resources. You are an educationist in an area where the literacy rate is, I think, the lowest in Pakistan. And today you are here. So I'm sure people would like to know, from an educationist to politics to, now here, how difficult has the journey been?
I would start with the theme for, the International Women's Day theme, 2019, which is Balance for Better. I think that is what actually the vision that my father had, the little education that we had at that time. This is now 1982 I'm talking about. And where he felt it's very important that women are educated, as important as boys' education. We are 7 sisters and 3 brothers, but all through our lives, till today, we've never felt any difference between the girls and the boys. That's the kind of mindset.
But you would say that that is unusual for our society.
Exactly.
And especially for Baloch society, which is more conservative than your urban area.
Exactly. I would just mention that we were born in Kuwait, and even then, when he started sending us to school, the resistance even in Kuwait within the Baloch community was so strong that what's the need for sending your daughters to school? So even then he said, for me they are as equal to any boy.
What made him think so differently? Was it just him, or was it his family that was different?
I think
was he just a unique individual who decided that
I think
balance for better back then?
I think it was because, even as a young man, and the stories that we would hear when he was back home, we come from a very strong tribal background, as you said, the Rind tribe. And in his, like I'm talking about the early 40s, and 47, 48, he left Pakistan to go to Iraq, and then he went on to Kuwait, and that is where he settled down. But prior to that, as a young man, naturally we had the British, army there in that part of the country. And I hear, and we've heard, that he was the first one to actually go to that camp and be educated to class 5 by the British army people, and that was something uncommon. He was the first to, in fact, cut off his long hair, so he was a revolutionary, I would say, even then.
He was born a revolutionary.
And it was said that he's no more a warrior in the sense, because Rinds are known for their warrior manship and all that. So they said he's out of the society because he's cut his hair, he's going for education, so he's,
he's not one of us anymore.
One of us anymore. But the background is that my grandfather, my, and my great-grandfather, they've always been the head of those, the Rinds tribe, like we don't believe in the Sardari Nizam even till today. And even then we never believed in it as a Baloch tribe. But what we do have is the Mutbareen, as they are called, the heads of the tribes and the sub-tribes. So in spite of that, there was a lot of social work still being done for their own people, whether it was, the farmers, whether it was the, like you have the skilled people, the carpenters and the ironmongers and all that within a society, as you know, or whether it was the help, who were actually the people who were working in your homes. So there's a lot of equality.
Okay.
In the Makran society, in the Makrani
so I'm
division,
seeing,
as you see.
From so far what you're saying, I'm seeing something that is linking all of this together. From the way you're saying that your tribe particularly is based more on equality. I see your father taking it a step further, taking it a step further, resisting the status quo, and getting an education, and as you said, cutting his hair off. It might be something very small to the people who are listening, but it's a huge thing to actually sort of do that, and then to go take it further and to educate his daughters.
Right,
and facing the resistance within the Baloch community in Kuwait.
Right,
Okay, so, I mean, when your father does all of this, I'd like to know what sort of man in that community gives his daughter to him. They're probably wondering, he's not a warrior, so I don't know if I want my daughter marrying him. So how did your parents then?
Actually, my mother, in those days, child marriages were the norm.
Absolutely.
My mother says she was about 9 when she was actually playing outside when they told her, that she's going to be the bride. And what excited them those days, she says, when, it was the clothes that they would be wearing and the jewelry, and not realizing or understanding, what they're getting into. But she says there she was at the age of 9, a bride, and that is how it happened. And then there's another thing, that my parents never ever insisted on having cousin marriages. They themselves were not cousins, related within the same tribe. Till the 80s and 90s, in fact, I was the first one who married someone out of my tribe.
There's a lot of firsts in your family. I know. There seems to be a family that through decades is setting these precedents of firsts.
And that was a break in the whole norm of marrying off your daughters within the tribe. Okay. And there I go again, being the first, but now it's a norm. So it's happening all over, Balochistan. Not only getting married to members of other tribes within the Baloch society, but actually marrying people from, from the Pakhtun or Punjabis, or, this has become a norm now. So when I say a 40 years journey, education for me and for my family has been not something that you go for a job. It has been changing the whole attitudinal, mindset. Holding on to your good traditions and customs, which are good, but those which negate the sort of inequality or enhance the inequality. Those traditions automatically then get finished off through education.
Now we see a lot of young girls, even now. I think there is resistance for a lot of families when their daughters decide to come into politics. People aren't that calm. The hours are very long.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of traveling that's involved. And it has so far been a male-dominated field, like most areas within Pakistan, because women have not had an opportunity. So families are resistant. But, you're here today. I'm sure that one of the reasons behind it is the support of your family.
Exactly. The support of the family, it's very important. Whenever, women say, And we always give the credit to the woman, which I think is very important. After every successful man, behind every successful man, there's a woman. Right. But I also feel that behind every successful woman, there's a man.
That's true.
You know, it's either your father, and then your brothers are there. Since the father's okay with it, so you know, brothers don't have much to say about it. But then when you get married, it's the husband also, because for him it's a change also, you know, in where you see that the woman is empowered, she's in such high positions, and to accept that.
Because you know, it starts with you know, other members of our society. I don't think the men would be as concerned, but you know, when they're sitting with their friends, in their male-dominated whatever circle it is, the first question that is asked is, why does your wife need to work? As though working is only for financial reasons, because you have a desire to achieve and you should be. The second one is, do you feel comfortable with your wife? You know, sitting amongst men and you know, because the concept of this chadar, char diwari. And so the man, even without wanting to, is forced to sort of, you know, exceed, or sometimes, you know, feel that he has to explain himself.
Yeah, exactly. That does happen, you know. For me, like being the first one who had to move out, you know, from, say, my hometown was Mand, right on the Iranian border. So for me to actually go to an office would be like traveling 120 kilometers. In those days, we would you know, measure roads by hours, because they were shingle roads. We wouldn't say
so how many hours would it?
It would take normally 3 to 4 hours for me to reach Turbat headquarters.
Every day you would commute?
Not every day, but the day that I would need to be with the education department, or with the commissioner or the DC I had to connect with. Now, all of those were men, you know, and in those days, single girls, unmarried, were not allowed to leave their home till they got married. I had a very late marriage, you know, compared to my family, the tradition and all that, because I started this work and I wanted to continue. And as you said, then the husband that my parents would want to choose for me, for them it was really a challenge to find somebody who would accept and allow me to continue with what I'm doing. So, and
but I'm glad that they at least thought about it, because many parents would say, you know what, you're doing this now, but tomorrow when you're married, you can just give it up. This is a stopgap arrangement. So
Alhamdulillah, I didn't have, you know, that, and my mother just once told me, you know, do remember that you are in a society where, you know, this is our tradition and custom, when women do not actually move out. But even, you know, there comes a time where you have to change yourself personally, so that your own character and behavior many times, so that you do not become an obstacle for other women to move forward.
How
you know,
so?
Like for instance, if willingly or unwillingly, like when I went into education, I became a symbol for education in that part of the world. And then one wrong, you know, step of mine or mistake could have stopped other girls from coming into education.
So you're saying that you are no longer just doing this for yourself. Then you have to be cognizant that you are a role model and a symbol. That's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. So that is why when even now young girls, mashallah, highly qualified in Balochistan, you know, in my tenure, we started 4 new universities, more on accessibility, you know, colleges, far-flung areas, and send access for girls' education. Whether it was through the government, because it's the state responsibility to provide it, but then more and more of public-private partnerships coming, because my own experience was more of a community, you know, participatory thing. Where we couldn't wait for the government to come anymore. I mean, 1982, and you still don't have a single girls' school in that part. So we said, how long do we wait for the government to move in? So all of those experiences, you know, today you find the girls of Balochistan no lesser than anyone. Even my own students, many are doctors now, many have gone abroad, pilots, you know, bankers, chartered accountants, which we would have never thought of. You know, girls from Mand or Turbat would reach that level. Right. So, and then now many more wanting to come into politics. Yeah, after seeing, you know, and specifically when the government in, I remember very well, March 2000, International Women's Day, and where I was even Minister for Women Development for the initial 8 months. And I raised the issue of honor killings, and I said, honor killings are murder, you know, no matter what happens.
You see, again, I will say this. It sounds very simple, you sitting over here and saying it, that honor killings are murder, but to see it in 2000 in a society, you know, which is so patriarchal, where honor is everything.
Nobody even discuss it.
Nobody wants to discuss it. It's buried under the carpet, you know, swept under. And, you know, just the phrase itself, honor killings, there is no honor.
Exactly.
In killing.
Exactly. You know, there's no honor in killing. And then when we
but didn't they say, look at the sort of things she's saying? She's actually putting these ideas into, you know, into the minds of our daughters, that they should disregard, you know, what their traditions say, what our traditions say.
Exactly. It's a lot, you know, as you said, when it's done, all done and said, you know, when you sit and think and reflect on, you know, the kind of important and being a person who was instrumental into getting these laws into, you know, the penal code and onwards, you then realize the whole, you know, sort of, I would say, it just comes to you, you know, that I'm glad that I did it at that moment. Otherwise, you know, you never know. We still face so much today also. Absolutely. You know, then on the other hand, even on the National Commission, on the status of women, it's the Permanent National Commission, also was initiated by me, and it was set up at that time. But now, coming to women, you know, getting that space to come into politics, when I was the first 3 years, 1999 to 2002, before the general elections and coming directly into politics through general elections, within the cabinet, there was the decision, if you remember, the LFO came in, legal framework ordinance, where we insisted, we were 17 ministers at that time, the only woman again in the cabinet, and I insisted that we have 33% of, you know, reserved seats for women at the local council level. And then as we came into provincial and the sort of the National Assembly level and the Senate, we said 17 to nearly 18% at different level. Now that opened the space for many women to come into, you know, politics.
I think it was a very wise decision, given that we're 50% of the population, and if there wasn't this quota, then we would never be allowed to come in, because they would rather have the system continue as it is.
As it is, you know. So these were part of the LFO, which as soon as the democratically elected governments came in 2002 and onwards, in 2008 or whatever, the LFO was torn apart by the opposition, by nationalist parties. But they couldn't undo the reserved seat woman for women. And that is the best part, I feel, that things continued. So the last 3 tenures, if you look at it, 2002, 2008, 2013, and it's 2019 now. So you'll find that many and many more young women in Pakistan have aspirations to be part of these, you know, bodies, whether it's local council, whether it's the national and provincial or the Senate itself. Now, for Baloch women also, you'll find initially the setups were, as we saw, till the last elections, 2013, that it would normally be women nominated who had really strong family, political family backgrounds.
If their son didn't qualify, or if the husband didn't qualify, that's when they would put her in. So the party, to
appease them, would get their woman on the reserved seat. But this time, our party, which is the Balochistan Awami Party, decided in Balochistan that we will not go through this. We will pick only those women who have a background, who have done something for the province itself. You know, the back sort of criteria was
They don't
that
have
no
to come
family
from
members.
a certain
Yes,
family
no. If
in
they
order
can
to
come
contest for a
exactly
seat.
to get a seat. So you see, we do not have family linked women in the Balochistan
I think
province.
that, you're not just talking to me about changes and about, wanting women to move forward and be emancipated. But from what you're telling me now, I also am sensing that there is a very strong tilt towards not just gender equality, but social equality when you're mentioning that you want to, and you've tried to take on women who don't come from a background of privilege and who haven't just had it handed to them. Why are you so sensitive to these issues? One obvious reason being that you are, you do belong to a province which has had the history of being neglected, but it seems that you are very much sensitized to issues of equality. Is there any particular reason for this?
And as I said, I think it's maybe this all comes, the strength comes from the way we were brought up, you know, where back in Makran, you'll find a different society completely to the other parts of Balochistan also, where you have the feudal system and, you know, the oppressiveness as we call it. But in Makran, equality of men and women is something that you grow up with.
Okay.
You know, and being able to then sort of do something for the others, as I said, I feel more strengthened through it.
Okay.
You know, and that is how, for me, it's very important. Knowing Islam is also very important. Knowing the Sharia is also very important, where misconceptions, you know, do come out because if you do not have the knowledge. I don't have much knowledge. I don't claim that. But I read the Quran and I understand it. And that is what strengthens me.
And also, I think the knowledge matters because when, like you said, I don't know enough. I do read the Quran, but I'm not an expert. But
exactly.
when there are other people sitting across the table and they are claiming to be the experts and they're trying to tell you that, you know, Islam does not allow this or emancipate women, then at least you're able to turn around and say, well, actually, no, let me stop you right there.
Exactly.
That
has happened many times.
Oh, it has happened?
Yes, it has happened many times, and many times
I'm sure it's been comical and funny most of these times. So
it has happened. In my education case, there were quite a few.
What did they say?
You know, like for instance, we were trying to get in the social studies, more of human rights, you know, more knowledge on the diseases, you know, that prevail nowadays. For instance, HIV/AIDS was one issue. Child abuse, and those were many times also issues. And
so what did they say to this? How can these not be issues?
When I went to KPK and we said we would like to, and the ministers were, at our time, MMA was very strong.
Okay.
Both my provincial ministers, KPK and Balochistan, were from MMA. You know, so we went there, we sat down with the curriculum people, the ministers and everyone. And I just made a little speech on, you know, being parents and all of us knowing. So these are issues that we should discuss. But the Quran also says very clearly, there are lots of chapters where it is mentioned, you know, the kind of conduct between a man and woman. And the reasons for many acts were because, which was declared haram, were because they were harmful to the human being itself. So naturally, these are things, I said, if the Quran for a child who is 7 years old, normally in Islam it is said that at the age of 7 you should start reading the Quran. Now for a child who is an Arab, who knows Arabic, at the age of 7 starts reading the Quran, and by the age of, I mean, that's the background I was, you know, taught by my family, that by the age of 14, then it becomes compulsory for you to read. Now, if a child of 14 is reading this in the Quran, and then wants to go into a reference and know more about that reference that is there. And for them, it's not a problem, they'll pick up. So when this is there, so it means that knowledge about the world and about things is not restricted to age. So if we want to teach this in a class of 9 and 10, what are we doing wrong? When students go for medical, biology is there, and it's a co-education, set up in medical colleges. So what knowledge are you trying to keep children aware? And when we left that, they agreed to have the HIV/AIDS lesson in the book.
Okay.
And when we left, the minister told a colleague of mine, well, we didn't know that she knows so much about Islam. Thinking that coming somebody from speaking English, coming in Musharraf's tenure.
So it's a stereotype.
It's the stereotype thought that, this, we don't know what this woman will be coming out with.
I understand the resistance to change. There is always resistance to change initially. In Pakistan, I feel women have come a long way, but there is much further to go. We have a very, if we look at the maternal healthcare system, we see a very dismal rate over here. When we look at education, there's still a long way to go. And I think if people realized that, a daughter is an asset, an educated wife is an asset,
exactly.
It would change things tremendously. Are people over here scared about the fact that the dynamics of power between a man and a woman will change, and that's why they're resistant?
It's a lot. I
what
think
fundamentally at the core of it?
Initially, you see, there's a combination of things. Like in the rural areas, you'll find still the mindsets, culturally and socially, औरत निकल रही है, she's going out, she's working, and what will the other men of the society say, and things like that. But then when we come to a higher level, of the more middle class or maybe the elite system, I find that it's then, and even at the lowest level, I've seen that once a woman starts working, she has money. Okay. She becomes financially empowered. And that is something which men do not like.
Why?
Because then she can make her own decisions.
But what's wrong with making your own decisions?
Nothing at all. But that is how society is. That is how,
I think the rates of domestic abuse would go down. I think things would be much better because people would think 10 times before raising a hand on a woman who is educated and financially capable.
Yeah. You see, education itself, my own experience has shown me, the age of marriage goes up because family then start thinking, well, she's doing her matric, let her do her inter, let her go to her graduation, get a job, and then we'll get her married off. So automatically age goes up of marriage, from, it's now 18, hopefully in Pakistan for children, but it was 16, it was, child marriage.
It's gone up. If you look at statistics, women who are educated, the higher your education, the fact that you're working, the better your children are. This is a Harvard study that says this. They're more independent, more successful. Yet we're not understanding. At the end of the day, over here, the decision always is, well, he's your father.
Yeah.
He's your husband.
So you see, that is what, it will take us still time. And I always feel that change is not something that can happen overnight. It takes years of hard work. It's gradual, it's slow. But until or unless we do not have that 100% literacy, things won't change overnight. So the biggest challenge for the government is to see that we provide that education to each and every child, whether it's boys or girls. Again, I'll come back to the
equality,
balance for better. Okay. You can't go from one extreme to another.
Sure.
Society has to be balanced, and that's very important.
But when the balance sometimes is completely askew, then it's important to, raise the women inside collectively. Thank you very much for having taken out the time. It was very interesting. not just to understand what the Ministry for Defence Production does, but more importantly, the journey that you have had. And I think that for the women who are watching you, for the young girls, you are a success story. You're a woman who's, gone through the different obstacles of life and come out successfully.
Thank you.
You will always now be known in history as the first female Minister of
Defence
Production. And
I would just like to add
yes,
on for the
please.
young girls, you
Please
know, that do not be discouraged. Ups and downs come in this, it's part of life.
What do they do when they're discouraged? If that's something you see in that moment, what would you say to them?
I would say just have the patience, let that period pass, and then start again.
So it's okay to fall, but you have to get up.
Yeah, you have to get up. It's okay to fall, but you have to get up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was wonderful interviewing you. As always, thank you very much for watching. And I always say we truly hope that Pakistan is headed towards a brighter, prosperous and safer future. Good night.